Government borrowing is the biggest issue in finance today.
Governments around the world are addicted to debt.
The sovereign debt levels globally have just grown exponentially.
If all the world's countries are in debt, and that's pretty much true, then who do they owe the money to?
What if I told you the world is drowning in over $300 trillion of debt, and no one really knows how to get out? America owes $36 trillion. China, $18 trillion. Europe, even more. But here's the twist. Every country is in debt. Every country is also lending. Who exactly is everyone borrowing from? It's not just confusing. It's a sign that the global economy is built on something far more fragile than gold, oil, or even technology. It's built on debt. Not as a backup plan, but as the main engine that keeps everything running. And this isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about how we got here and why we may never be able to leave. You see, debt didn't begin with Wall Street or central banks. It began with something far more human: need and trust. Thousands of years ago, before money, people borrowed in simpler ways. I'll give you grain now, you return it after harvest. No contracts, no interest, just trust. But then came kings, empires, and wars, and promises started getting bigger. When rulers wanted ships and armies, trust wasn't enough. They needed gold, and lots of it, but no one could provide it. So they invented something new: government debt. In the 1600s, England did something revolutionary. They sold small pieces of debt to the public, bonds. You gave the government gold, and they gave you a promise: we'll pay you back with interest. It worked. Citizens funded the Navy. England fought its wars, and a new financial tool was born. Over time, governments everywhere adopted it. Debt became more than a wartime tool. It became the way to build a future. Need roads? Borrow. Schools? Borrow. Healthcare, railways, power grids? Borrow. A nation's dreams weren't built on savings anymore. They were built on debt. And over time, that stopped being strange. It became normal, expected, even celebrated. Debt was no longer the last resort. It became the first move. But for a while, debt still had a leash. That leash was gold. For decades, money wasn't just paper. Every US dollar was backed by a fixed amount of gold. That meant governments could only print as much money as they had gold in their reserves. It kept things in check. It forced limits, and it made the system feel safe. But then came 1971. The US was spending heavily on war, on welfare, on economic expansion, and the gold just wasn't enough to back all those dollars floating around the world. So President Richard Nixon made a bold decision. He ended the gold standard. Just like that, the dollar was no longer tied to gold. Money became what we now call fiat currency. Money backed by nothing but government trust. And that changed everything. With no gold to limit them, governments could now create money freely. And if they could create money, they could borrow endlessly too. It was like removing the brakes on a speeding car. And from that point on, the global debt machine was fully unleashed. President Nixon made it official. We're done with gold. And just like that, the leash snapped. From that moment on, money became fiat, backed not by gold, but by belief. Belief in governments, in institutions, in stability. And with that shift, something else changed too. Debt became unlimited. There was no more hard limit on how much money could be created, which meant governments could borrow and spend like never before. And they did. But that raises a puzzling question. If every country is borrowing, who's doing the lending? You'd think it's a rich country, or a powerful bank, or maybe some mysterious billionaire pulling all the strings. But here's the mind-bending truth. Most of the time, we're just lending to ourselves. Let's break it down. You deposit $5,000 into your bank account. Seems safe, right? Maybe it's just sitting there. But that's not how modern banking works. Banks don't stash your money in a vault. They move it, they invest it. And one of the safest places they put it? Government bonds. These bonds are just formal IOUs, short for I owe you. a promise from the government: lend me money now, and I'll pay you back with interest. So when you deposit your money, your bank uses it to buy bonds. The government uses that money to fund roads, salaries, and defense. Then it pays the bank interest. And the bank gives a slice of that interest back to you. It's a loop, a cycle, and it doesn't end there. What's a government bond? It's a formal IOU. I owe you. A legal promise from the government that says, you give me money now, and I'll pay you back later with interest. So your bank takes your $5,000, buys government bonds. The government spends that money to build roads, pay salaries, manage crises, and then repays the bond with interest. Now expand that idea to millions of people depositing money, thousands of banks buying bonds, and entire pension funds and insurance companies relying on these IOUs. Pension funds, which manage retirement savings for teachers, police, and public workers, invest over 25% of their money into government bonds because they need safe, steady growth. Insurance companies go even further, some putting over 60% of their assets into these IOUs. Why? Because U.S. bonds are like financial gold. They don't swing like the stock market, they rarely default, and they pay predictable interest over time. So while it might sound terrifying that the U.S. owes $36 trillion, here's the surprising reality. 70% of that debt is owed to Americans themselves. Your bank, your retirement account, your insurance plan. These aren't just places where money sits. They're also lenders to the U.S. government through IOUs. And it's not just Americans. Countries like Japan and China also invest in U.S. debt. Japan currently holds over $1.1 trillion in U.S. bonds. China holds around $740 billion, not because they're trying to help the U.S., but because these IOUs are seen as some of the safest investments in the world. So in today's economy, countries aren't just trading goods, they're trading promises. IOUs at a global scale, and that's what keeps the financial world in motion. Debt today isn't just a burden, it's become a necessity. When a government borrows and spends, that money moves through the economy. People get paid, businesses grow, and governments collect more taxes. That borrowed money becomes fuel. In China, about 1 in every 5 yuan the government spends is borrowed. In the US, it's even more, $1 in $4. Take the borrowed money away, and everything slows down. The gears stop turning, and the consequences are immediate. Jobs disappear, not just in factories or tech companies, but in hospitals, schools, even your local grocery store. That's not just theory, it's exactly what happened in Greece during the 2008 financial crisis. For years, Greece had been borrowing to build roads, pay public workers, and support generous pensions. As long as investors kept buying Greek bonds, everything worked. The economy kept moving. But when the global crisis hit in 2008, confidence collapsed. Investors pulled out. No one wanted Greek debt anymore. And suddenly, the lifeline was gone. Greece couldn't borrow, and without borrowing, it couldn't spend. It ran out of money. Fast, down 1 in 4 public workers lost their jobs. Wages were cut by 30%. Public services crumbled. GDP shrank by 25%. Worse than the U.S. Great Depression, protests erupted. Suicide rates rose. Families were evicted. Hospitals ran out of supplies. Chaos unfolded. It wasn't just a debt problem. It was a full-blown economic breakdown, a human crisis, all because a country that lived on borrowing suddenly couldn't borrow anymore. Greece was eventually bailed out by the EU and the IMF, but with strict conditions: austerity, spending cuts, tax hikes, things that made life even harder for ordinary people. This is why debt today isn't just an accounting tool. It's not just about spreadsheets and interest rates. Debt is a lifeline, and when that lifeline breaks, people suffer. So when critics say, why don't governments just stop borrowing? The Greece crisis answers that loud and clear. Because in today's world, stopping debt doesn't slow things down. It stops everything. But here's the catch. There's a cost. The more governments borrow, the more they must repay, and that repayment comes with interest. In 2025, the U.S. will spend over $1 trillion just on interest. That's more than its entire defense budget. And when lenders get nervous, interest rates rise. Debt becomes more expensive. More money goes to the past, less to the future. At some point, every government faces a difficult decision: raise taxes, cut spending, or print more money. Printing sounds like the easy way out. Need cash? Just create it. But it comes with a dangerous side effect: inflation. And in extreme cases, it can destroy a country's entire economy. Let's take Sri Lanka. For years, Sri Lanka borrowed heavily from international lenders, private banks, and even China. Some of that money was used for infrastructure, ports, airports, highways, but much of it came with high interest rates and short-term repayment deadlines. Then came the shocks. The Easter bombings in 2019 crushed tourism. COVID-19 followed, wiping out their main source of foreign income, and global inflation made imports, from fuel to food, far more expensive. As government revenue fell and bills piled up, Sri Lanka started running out of options, so they turned to printing money. Between 2020 and 2022, the Central Bank of Sri Lanka printed over 1 trillion rupees just to keep the economy running. But it backfired badly. The rupee collapsed in value. Inflation soared to over 70%. Fuel became unaffordable. Electricity was rationed. There were massive food shortages. Schools closed. Hospitals ran out of medicine. And long queues formed just to buy basic necessities, like rice and milk. Bread, something once cheap and ordinary, became a luxury. The government defaulted on its foreign debt for the first time in history, and in July 2022, the pressure became unbearable. Protesters stormed the president's residence. The president fled the country. This wasn't just a financial crisis, it was a national breakdown. And here's a critical detail most people miss. Sri Lanka didn't just borrow in its own currency. It borrowed in US dollars, so when the rupee collapsed, their debt didn't shrink. It got even bigger in local terms. It's like earning in rupees, but owing in dollars. The worse your economy gets, the harder it becomes to pay. That's the cruel reality for many developing nations. Countries like Pakistan, Zambia, and Ghana are caught in the same trap. They borrow money to pay off old loans, then borrow again just to meet the interest payments. It's no longer a cycle, it's a trap, a debt trap, and escaping it requires drastic measures, usually at the cost of people's well-being. This is why endless borrowing might seem reckless from the outside, but for many nations, it's a matter of survival. So what happens next? We've built a system where debt is survival, where governments can't afford to stop borrowing because stopping means collapsing. But the more we borrow, the more fragile the system becomes. The loop gets tighter, the margins shrink. Can we really keep doing this forever? Can the world sustain a system where debt isn't the backup, but the foundation? Or are we simply delaying a reckoning that's already in motion? What do you think? Is global debt the greatest invention in human history, or its most dangerous illusion? Let us know in the comments.